How's it going, everyone? Obviously, we're doing that weird thing where Matt and I can't do full episodes right now, but in order to still give you all content, we're going to keep doing these little blurbs, give us some thoughts on a few things, because last time I checked, there is some basketball going on this weekend, and then the weekend prior, and pretty much for the entire month of March, and then the first weekend of April. It's kind of a big deal, also kind of my favorite time of year. So you really thought that we would wake it out of the first weekend of March Madness or the NCAA tournament, whatever you want to call it, and me not say anything? Come on, guys. You know me better than that. And you know that I have to talk about a couple of my teams in particular. So without further ado, I know what you're thinking. We know, Les, you got to talk about your Duke Blue Devils. And you are correct. So I have prepared a statement. Some of you all on social media have already read it, and that's okay because I'm going to read it again. And I even gave it a little fancy dancy name, called it 1200. So without further ado, obviously, because it was Coach K's 1200th win. I know, creative, I know. Anyways, but without further ado, here's the statement. I have too much to say about this game to fit in one tweet. I want to start by giving all the credit to Michigan State and Tom Izzo. The 13-3 head-to-head wins for Mike Krzyzewski against Izzo and the Spartans don't show how intense each matchup is. He's a Hall of Fame coach and has a great program. Today's game was an absolute dogfight. The Spartans played hard, got out in transition, and absolutely couldn't miss from three. Despite trailing by as many as 9 to the Blue Devils, they chipped and clawed their way back and led 75-70 with just over 3 to play. I thought the game was over. I thought Coach K would end his career in the round of 32. However, just when I begin to lose faith, this Duke team shows yet again why I believed they were special at the beginning of the season. Their resiliency was apparent in the closing minutes, and I can't say enough. As many good performances as I could point out, I can't say enough about Jeremy Roach. Roach is often the most criticized player on the Blue Devil roster, but had the game of his Duke career when called upon the most, and arguably hit the biggest three of the game, and a Tyus Jones-esque matter. The 9-point final spread doesn't show how competitive the game was. How fitting. The final matchup between Krzyzewski and Izzo came in an absolute dogfight. And just like win number 903 and other notables, win number 1200 comes at the hand of the Spartans. But obviously, that is the statement I had after the game. But, I had too many thoughts going on throughout the course of the game. I can't say enough about the performances of Mark Williams and Paulo Banchero, but of course, Jeremy Roach is the one that stood out to me because, as I mentioned in the 1200 passage, he's often the most criticized player on the roster. Even though I understand that usually that point guard for Duke is kind of like the captain of the Yankees or whatever, this is the one of those positions that people look to take charge the most. You look at some of the other Duke championship teams when you have a Tyus Jones or a Bobby Hurley or a Jason Williams. Yes, Roach isn't that category. But the role that he fits for this team specifically, he does well. He plays defense. He hits the occasional three. He can get to the rim when he needs to. He does what he needs to do when he needs to do. And I think it's perfect for what this team needs. Now, obviously, they have a big matchup coming on this Thursday at 9:30. It's going to be a little past my bedtime with my current work schedule. But, I got to stay up and watch my Blue Devils. I think Texas Tech matches up very well against Duke. They are long and athletic and can play very good defense, and those type of teams have given Duke problems all year long. So, hoping for the best, but it obviously is going to be a tough matchup. But go Duke nonetheless. And as for my other team, Texas, which you all know, they got eliminated this weekend. I didn't think they would get past Virginia Tech personally. The shooting clinic that Virginia Tech put on against Duke, and I knew that if they were able to score any amount of points against Texas, that I thought it was gonna be over. But Texas scored 81 points against Virginia Tech, which I don't think we've seen often at all this year. Offense has been the weak side of the Longhorn season, the first season under Chris Beard. They have number one scoring defense in college basketball, but offense has not gotten their legs under yet, for whatever reason. We'll see as the closing in the next several years under the Beard era if that ever adjusts. But for the time being, no. Offense has been the weak spot all season long. And I thought if Virginia Tech was going to shoot anything close to the way they did against Duke, then that Texas had no chance. But Texas matched their offense, and then they were able to move on. And as you all know who follow the show, my girlfriend's a Purdue grad. So obviously we had to watch the game together. And Purdue is one of those teams, if you all follow the pages, that I've been high on all year long. I knew it was going to be a tough fight. But, as for my Longhorns, I think they went on too long of scoring droughts at times and had no answer for Travion Williams all game long, had no answer for Jaden Ivey in the closing minutes of the game. And of course, I mentioned the physical defense and the number one scoring defense in college basketball, but it got just a little too physical because they put Purdue on the free throw line for 46 free throws, and that really was the difference in the game. But overall, I'm pleased in the first year under Chris Beard. I know it wasn't the lofty season that I had predicted in our college basketball preseason show, but still a successful season nonetheless. And for what it's worth, he already has more NCAA tournament wins than Shaka Smart did in his tenure in Austin. So we'll see how that goes. But some other games that I headlined, and I'm going to talk a bit about Memphis and Gonzaga first. It was headlined by Chet Holmgren and Jalen Duren. But Drew Timme and Andrew Nembhard were the ones that ended up stealing the show for the Zags. You got two potential top 5 picks in Holmgren and Duren, and they're almost, even though they're both play the center position, they're both two very polar opposite players. Neither one really played great. I mean, overall great. As far as, okay, let me rephrase how I say this. Neither one really played overall. They didn't light up the box score. Let's put it that way. Because I think both have their impacts. Jalen Duren, we all know, got into foul trouble. Chet Holmgren, he had the 9 points and 9 rebounds, which is whatever. But, I thought defensively he played very well, had his 4 block shots. And Memphis really wanted to send a message and try to go at Holmgren all game long. He really held his ground. As much as they attempted to score on him, they were not successful very often. So I think, but of course, in Jalen Duren, he had grabbed some very physical rebounds. He had a lot of plays on all the offensive glass. Was able to knock the ball out of Holmgren's grip and keep the play alive, which was very valuable. But nothing that I saw from Chet or Duren really changed my opinion on the two. I still see that both have the areas of improvement that I felt they needed to improve on, since I first started watching them. So, but obviously that was the intriguing matchup. But the experienced players are really who took over. Memphis was able to get out and get an early lead against Gonzaga in the first half. They were able to be more physical than them. They were able to out and run. And Gonzaga couldn't match their athleticism. But in the second half, I mean, man, I cannot say enough about the job that Drew Timme did. Drew Timme, in a lot of ways, was mine and a lot of people's preseason player of the year. After the season he had the previous year and now coming back. And at times, he didn't look like it. You can accredit that to, Chet Holmgren taking a lot of shots from the forward position away from him. Or, having Timme to move to the 4 or the 5 or whatever and alternate between the two and not really stay at his one natural position. But nonetheless, he delivered when it mattered. He pretty much just got the ball and he went on and he put every Memphis big that guarded him, whether that be Duren, whether that be number 23, whose name I'm blanking on right now. But he put on an absolute clinic, and whoever wanted to guard him, he just took him to school. And of course, I think a player on that team that often goes very underrated is Andrew Nembhard. I remember Andrew Nembhard when he was playing for Montverde with RJ Barrett, who is currently playing for the Knicks right now against the Hawks. Had to throw that in there. But not the point. Okay, not the point. Got a little sidetracked. But Andrew Nembhard is a very underrated point guard in college basketball. And he made shot after shot when Gonzaga needed it in a big moment. And of course, him and Timme both had over 20 points and led the Zags to victory. But I think personally, this is where the run comes to an end because I think they have Arkansas next, and I think Arkansas's length, depth, and athleticism and their shooting ability, much like Memphis but better, is going to be too much for the Zags to handle. So I have Arkansas actually knocking the number 1 overall seed out of the tournament this coming weekend. So, anyways, let's go on to the game of the weekend, arguably. I say arguably, but this is going to be so painful for me to watch this because you already probably know which game I'm talking about now, and that is UNC and Baylor. Look, I'm going to be honest. UNC had no business winning this game. They jumped out to a 25-point lead. And I know what you're thinking. Well, they jumped out to a 25-point lead. They should have closed it out right there. Yes, that is why I say they have no business winning this game. Because they allowed Baylor to climb right back in and get not only that, but red-hot Brady Manick was ejected on flagrant 2, which I know a lot of people have debated if that was a flagrant 2 or not, but, either here nor there. Also, point guard Caleb Love fouled out. Or, combo guard, whatever you want to consider him, fouled out of the game as they go into OT. However, RJ Davis, who has been on an absolute tear, clearly since the Duke game, since Coach K's last regular season game, he had a great game, scoring over 30 points. And Armando Bacot, they had no answer for him on the block, whether that be grabbing rebounds or being able to get where he wants to go for, free throws or this, that, or whatever. But, North Carolina's playing great ball right now. I didn't think, a lot of people under first-year head coach Hubert Davis didn't have a lot of expectations for them this year. But, since the latter half of the season, they've played as good as anybody. And they're going to be a tough out the rest of the way. Next up they have a UCLA team that was fresh off of a Final Four the year before, so that's going to be a very interesting to see how that goes. RJ Davis has arguably his best point guard defensive matchup against Tiger Campbell, and we'll see if he can continue to play as well as he has. I do like Bacot in this matchup with the bigs. I'm not really a fan of the Bruin bigs. I think Bacot could have a field day on the glass. But obviously, the number one thing you got to do against UCLA is, can you hold Johnny Juzang in check? And if the answer is yes, then they have a good chance of walking away. But we'll see. I think that should be a good game. Look, North Carolina matches up with them really well, and they're playing as good as anybody. So I'd hate to see it, but why do I have this very, very odd feeling that it's going to shape up to be a Duke-Carolina championship game in Coach K's last year? I don't know. I have a very odd feeling. I'm hoping at least Duke's in there, but I could really go without the other guys being in there. You didn't hear that from me. Okay, yeah, you did. But anyways, moving on to the Miami versus Auburn game. And look, anybody who follows my social media pages knows what I'm about to say. I told you majority of the season, with Auburn being number 1, they started to look exposed as the season went on. I don't know what it was. I don't know what specifically, but it looked like teams were able to get to certain spots on the court and it opened up whatever they wanted to do on offense. And they started taking advantage of that. I also said that Miami was very underrated. And I was right about both. Because Miami convincingly defeated Auburn. And that's going to play a big role into where I'm going to say what I'm going to end this segment on. But they're going to match up. Their next game, they're going to match up against Iowa State, which had a very good defensive showing against Wisconsin, and they held the Big Ten Player of the Year, Johnny Davis, in check. Anyways, next game, Houston and Illinois. Houston showed why I'm high on them. They dominated on the offensive glass and forced crucial late turnovers. What's even more impressive about that is how they were able to keep one of the best big men in college basketball, Kofi Cockburn, off the glass. They don't really have a lot of size, but they have a lot of grit. And that Carlton forward, I absolutely love his game. He's an absolute dog. And as I mentioned, they play with so much tenacity, they have quick hands, such good defense, so much grit. And the offense takes care of itself. And against Illinois, it came in the form of the guard Sheed, who just was an absolute bucket that game. And because of how good I think Houston is, their next game is against a number one seed Arizona, who survived an overtime scare against TCU. I like Houston to upset Arizona. I don't know what it is, but Arizona has not impressed me all year long. I just watch them and I'm not impressed. I think Benedict Mathurin is good. I think he's a very good player. But I like the Cougars to knock off the Wildcats. Another game. But of course, the biggest story that I know you all were waiting for me to talk about is our Cinderella, our 15-seeded St. Peter's Peacocks, who, as I am a big fan of, knocked off the Kentucky Wildcats in the opening in their opening game of the NCAA tournament. Some of the statistics I was seeing on the money differential between the funding of the basketball program at St. Peter's versus Kentucky is just absolutely mind-blowing. Um, all of Kentucky's assistant coaches make more per year than St. Peter's head coach. And honestly, what was even more surprising about that for me is that as much as I like to rag on Kentucky, this was the Kentucky team that I thought had the best chance to make a championship run since the Anthony Davis team. Um, I know what you're thinking. The 2015 team had 10 players drafted, and they almost went 40-0. I was not a fan of that team winning the championship that year because I felt like they were winning so much. They won so much during the regular season, obviously, that they were going to need a loss so that once they entered the NCAA tournament undefeated, I knew that they were going to get their first loss in the tournament. I don't like to predict teams to go undefeated in today's day and age in basketball. I just think I think talent and competitiveness is just more spread out now than it ever was, and it's only going to continue to get better. So. Yeah, I was not big on that Kentucky team to win it all that year, despite how much talent they had. But what was so different about this Kentucky team is that it really reshaped the narrative of the typical John Calipari team at Kentucky, not really heavily one-on-one based. I mean, you had Ty Washington, but other than that, it was majority transfers. Oscar Tshiebwe, who will more than likely win Player of the Year this year, Kellen Grady, Severe Willer, guys like that have experience, but wanted to come to Kentucky to obviously win more games and make a deeper run of the tournament. That obviously did not happen. And St. Peter's moved on and beat another Bluegrass team in Murray State. So obviously St. Peter's just owns the Bluegrass right now. And that's about all I have to say about them. But however, I do think their run is going to come to an end as they have to match up with my girlfriend's Purdue Boilermakers. As talented as Kentucky was, and as good as Murray State had been playing, the problem with St. Peter's is they don't have the depth at the big man position to be able to guard Travion Williams, Zach Edey, and Caleb First. It's just a reality. Jaden Ivey's going to get his. He's too good of a player. But, when they lack that depth at that big position, that's just going to be too much for the Peacocks to overcome. And I think the clock's about to strike midnight on the St. Peter's Peacocks. Moving on. Another game that was good to me was Villanova and Ohio State. Surprisingly a good one because Villanova looked control at the very end. I remember even dozing off during the game, just being exhausted as I am, working as many hours as I have been. And Ohio State, I wake back up and Ohio State is only down 2, and they made it a game. But Colin Gillespie continues to show why his experience matters. He continued to get the right plays, getting the right teammates open, and Villanova was able to advance. And, of course, I know what a lot of you are thinking. They are going to advance to play Michigan, a team that I did not think deserved to be in the NCAA tournament. But isn't that funny how that usually works? You have a team that you don't think deserves to be in the tournament, yet here they are in the Sweet 16. They knocked off a decent Tennessee team, but obviously, as a former Texas fan, I know how Rick Barnes' teams work. He's a great coach if you don't have a strong basketball program to be relevant again, but you're never going to get deep tournament runs out of him. That is just the reality of it. No offense to Rick Barnes. I don't really care if he gets upset with that because what the hell does he makes millions of dollars. What the hell does he care what I think? But that's the reality. He's great for making a program relevant, but you're never going to get that deep playoff run, or at least not consistently. Finally, I'm going to get into the theme of March Madness, and that is one thing I've noticed is that has a tendency to make conferences that we think look really good maybe not look so good. I remember in our college preseason predictions, Matt and I were very high on the Big Ten and the SEC as, the top conferences in college basketball. It's not looking like that now. They're having horrible performances. The NCAA tournament also has a tendency to make team conferences that we don't think are very good, or maybe in a down year, look really good. The ACC, we all thought was having a down year. Outside of Duke, they didn't really pose much of a threat, but obviously North Carolina, Miami, and are making a lot of people rethink that. The ACC is showing that they are still one of the best conferences in college basketball, even in a quote-unquote down year. So without further ado, that's why you got to love March. You just never know what's going to happen. And the narratives that we think all season long just get thrown out the window. A lot of y'all, like I said earlier, a lot of y'all thought Auburn was the best team in the country for the majority of the year. And as the season progressed, as I predicted, they got exposed. We thought the SEC and the Big Ten were the best conferences all year long. Now it's looking like, at least in the tournaments, the ACC. So I'm looking forward to the next slate of games. Before I end this video, I know you all obviously see that I'm rocking the Colts hat. I've rocked that the last several episodes, just trying to hide the fact that I desperately need a haircut. But I absolutely love the trade for Matt Ryan. I have been very critical of the Colts not making moves in years past, and I thought that this offseason was going to be much of the same. But up to this point, when they got Yannick Ngakoue, I'm sorry if I butchered that name, but very good pass rusher, guy who pretty much consistently gets 10 sacks a season, which is very, very surprising that he can't find a consistent home, knowing that he gets 10 sacks a season. It's very surprising to me. But, of course, the big trade that I'm talking about is for the Colts, who got for a very good price, only sending a third-round pick to Atlanta to grab our next quarterback in Matt Ryan, a.k.a. Matty Ice. And, if Matt was on the show, I'd probably say Matt Burr himself. But I love the move. It has a very, I'm just going to read this because a lot of you all on social media have already seen my statement on it. But I'm just going to read it to you because that's what I do. Matt Ryan to Indy has a very Matt Stafford to Los Angeles feel. A very good quarterback who often gets overlooked because of lack of playoff success on a subpar team. When the Falcons had a good roster, Ryan was great and got the recognition he deserved. Now he goes to a team with 7 Pro Bowlers. Yes, when the Falcons had a good roster, we saw Matt Ryan win the MVP. And even in other years when he's not getting the recognition because the Falcons aren't winning games, he's still consistently passing over 25 touchdown passes and over 4,000 yards. Very good numbers and very good completion percentage rankings. Very good quarterback rankings at that. The problem is he's only one guy. There are certain levels to this. There are quarterbacks like a Tom Brady, like a Peyton Manning, like an Aaron Rodgers, and others that can just elevate a subpar team and make them a good team. Matt Ryan is very good. He's not to that level. He's closer to the Stafford mold. A very good quarterback, who has a good team around him is more than capable of winning a Super Bowl. So the thing is now the AFC is absolutely loaded this year, especially at the quarterback position with Russell Wilson coming to Denver. But, I really like the Colts' chances to make a deep playoff run this year. I think Matt Ryan can do great things. And I know there's a lot of talks, so people are going to ask, Les, what do you think about them trying to lure Julio there? Hopefully we can get him for a cheap price. And the only reason I say that is because of the version of Julio that we saw last season. I don't want that version of Julio on the team. And if he is going to be, and if that version was to come to Indy, I hope it's very cheap. So it's expendable. But if he shows anything close to the Julio that dominated the postseason during the Falcons Super Bowl run, or the guy that was setting career yardage mark records at a historic pace, I'm all for it. So that's all my thoughts today. If there's any games that you wish I should have covered maybe more, comment in the comment section below. I can't wait to get me and Matt back on to do full-length episodes, but these are going to have to do for the time being. So without further ado, that's all I got.